What's up, guys? We're back here with another one. This is one of my favorite albums of all time. I've done Dying Fetus in the past. I used to really like that album a lot. I don't listen to it a whole lot anymore. It's still a good, catchy album. Honestly, a lot of Dying Fetus's music is pretty catchy. They're very talented in my opinion, but right now this is my favorite album of them, Killing on Adrenaline. This is album review number 26. Now, first off, this is a pretty meaningful, anger-driven album for me, essentially. Honestly, let me give you the number review overall for this album. I give it a 10 out of 10 for me personally. You know, to start off this album with a decent, heavy-ass banger, which is called, of course, Killing on Adrenaline, which is the name of this album. This song is basically about is somebody messing with the wrong person, essentially, and the dude kills him with his bare hands in front of everybody else. Like, he literally beats his head in. You know, that he must have had a very bad day. A very bad day, honestly. And he wanted, essentially, for everybody to see it, necessarily, so everybody knows not to screw with him. You know, after so long of getting picked on, you know, a guy gets tired of it, you know, and eventually either he ends up killing himself or he ends up trying to beat the shit out of the other person, necessarily, which is what tends to happen a lot, necessarily, in teenhood, childhood, you know, not childhood, but like high school and a little bit later on in middle school. 7th to 8th grade, usually 8th grade. That's when people start fighting back, usually, but more commonly in 9th grade. Other than that, this is my honest number review of the song. It's a 7 out of 10. It's close to 8. It's really close. To me, it's a really good song. That's my honest number review of the song. Now, with that being said, let's go into the next song, Procreate, The Malformed. What I have found this song necessary to be is a revolution against communism. Not necessarily like the USR kind of communism, but the Karl Marx kind of communism. To me, it's a pretty decent song. I don't really have too much to say about the song, since necessarily, you know, it's basically a simple meaning. It doesn't have too much of an emotional connection to me, necessarily. I mean, it kind of sort of does a little bit, but other than that, my honest number review of this song has to be a 6 out of 10. Now, with that being said, let's go into the next song. One of my favorite songs of this album, called Absolute Defiance. This is the meaning of this song to me, necessarily, is very heavy. Well, sorta. It's either it's a philosophy or kind of just like a story that the singers made or the lyricist made up for this song. The meaning of it necessarily is false prophets, believing in their religion, and people who necessarily choose to blindly follow their prophets, you know, or they idolize the wrong thing, and all these people basically get killed. Now, this reminds me a lot of biblical times, because when you idolize things that really weren't God, you tend to get wiped out and or taught a very harsh lesson. You know, it's anything worshiping other than God was a very heavy sin, necessarily, in the Bible. So I can see a good influence of this being from the Bible, necessarily. My honest number review of this song, I'd have to give it a 9 out of 10. I really like this song. Now, with that being said, those are my honest thoughts. Let's get into the next song on this album, which is my favorite off this album, called Judgment Day. Now, what I have to say about this song is it's a cover. I didn't even know it was a cover until I tried to look up the meaning. I don't have a whole lot to say about it, just that it's my favorite song, and it's necessarily a cover. And my honest number review of it, of course, it's my favorite song, a 10 out of 10. Much expected, totally. Other than that, you know, it's a pretty heavy ass song. You know, I like all the songs of this album. With that being said, let's go into the next song, which has a decent rating also, and which is called Intentional Manslaughter. The meaning of this decent song, I found out to be, is necessarily where everything's going to hell, you know, robots are basically becoming the gods, you know, taking over Earth, you know. I see this similar to the Bible also, like the other song that I talked about, because how humans revolted against God and then took over world and essentially became their own gods, and we do some pretty horrible things necessarily, you know. But essentially, put that in the same cycle, but robots are rising up against humans, and we were the gods to robots essentially, you know, because we create robots essentially. So that's how they saw us, you know. But other than that, it's a good song, you know. It's pretty decent. My honest number review, I'd have to say, if I haven't said it already, is a 7 out of 10. Now, with that being said, let's go into the extra information about this album. This might seem a little short, but I'm trying to make it as long as possible and as enjoyable. Now, extra information. This heavy-ass album came out in 1998. It contains 8 heavy-ass songs. Typically, that's not a lot of songs, but in a death metal album, that's a decent amount. Now, this whole album weirdly lasts 34 minutes. A lot of, like I said, death metal music is short, at least brutal death metal. Brutal death metal is different from classic death metal, like Possessed or the band Death, you know, who I consider the godfathers of death, really, not Possessed. Other than that, it lasts 34 minutes. To me, I technically call it their first album, even though I've searched up and I've seen something else. But over the years, you know, they have a really cool sound. You know, their sound has changed, which is normal. Life changes and adapts in its own way. Some people call it slam. I don't necessarily call it slam because this has meaning. You know, there's a song on here that has a slam name necessarily, but it's not even closely related to the title name. It's about a stereotype, and I didn't go over that song, by the way, but it's legitimately put together necessarily. Now let's go into the lineup for this album. John is on vocals and guitars, Jason is on bass and vocals, Brian is on guitars, and Kevin is on drums. I think Brian left the band. I originally know them right now as 3 members. I think there was an extra person. I'm not necessarily sure. Or maybe 2 other different people, because the pictures I've looked up and seen, there's 2 other people that look completely different from the band, and one of them kinda looks like one of the 3rd members in the band that I know of right now. Other than that, this is a really awesome band, you know. They're really catchy, honestly, but they're also brutal death metal at the same time and really heavy. Honestly, you can get to any album by them if you listen to the album long enough, you know. Not necessarily on repeat, but you know how you listen to an album, you don't like it necessarily as first, and you have to keep on listening to it, then you start to really like it. Essentially like that, you know. And when I first heard this album, I was like, okay, cool. Picked out my favorite songs, rerun over them necessarily. Other than that, you know, we're at the end of the video. Let me scroll through some of the pictures so you can see them again. But anyways, make sure to have an amazing day. Always stay positive, no matter what happens, your situation, no matter what. Just have a good mindset. Other than that, I'd highly recommend to check out this album. Make sure to have a good one. Stay positive, like, comment, subscribe, and to always have a good one. I'll be back later.